So Vint, with that said, surf's up.
Yes, and well, first of all, thank you, Herman. That was so sweet and a little overwhelming. The surf's up, which is supposed to be a positive statement, is quite frankly scary as hell in the context of global warming, because it may be up well beyond where we are capable of coping with it. So today's discussion is intended to uncover possibilities, and we're going to ask you to think about possible scenarios that we may face. They will be of our own doing, no doubt. And so we're going to break up into groups to consider each of these scenarios. Now, we don't want to be overly prescriptive, to be quite honest. We will tell you about the 3 possible doors we could be going through, but we expect you to be self-igniting in these discussions and to capture some of the thoughts that you have, particularly those that might result in real action that allows us to go from where we have been, which is hoping we're going to survive, to coping with survival. The earlier remarks tonight make it very clear that we cannot simply relax and let nature take its course, because nature will take its course and it will take us along with it, possibly not where we want to go. In fact, I have to tell you an experience I had when I was younger was briefing a Nobel Prize winner, Josh Lederberg, on digital libraries. I was quite enthusiastic about this idea of a digital library, and I still am, actually. And I remember spending probably an hour in front of a whiteboard, and I was drawing, how this thing would all work, and there's boxes over here, and protocols would go this way. And Josh, bless his heart, the Nobel Prize in recombinant DNA, looks at me at the end of my long hand-waving diatribe, and he says, "Vint, do something. Don't just talk about it, do something." And they were hoping, frankly, that you will come up with some things that we should seriously consider undertaking. So Herman had the creative idea of showing you the 3 doors that we might be going through in this discussion. So Herman, I don't know if you have your slides available, but regardless, that's the one. There we go. Okay, so these are the 3 doors that we're going to break up into groups for. Again, let me say that it's okay if you decide that you want to talk about something else. We just want you to do something useful. So let's talk about the first door. If you go to the next slide, this was the one. This is the hopeful one, where we actually take immediate action. We understood that we must do something. We understand what we have to do to eliminate greenhouse gases, to pull CO2 out of the atmosphere. We managed to limit the rising temperature to something that's manageable. And so the question then is, what combinations of policies and actions would lead us to do that? What's keeping us from doing this and taking the humanity through door number 1? Or what could we trigger? What action could we undertake? What rallying cry could we use that would help us get through door number 1? But being, let's say, pragmatic, it's possible that door number 1 is closed to us, and we may end up going through door number 2. And this is the one where we didn't quite manage to get control over everything. We are going to experience sea rise and more severe storms, as we are all seeing. In fact, in an earlier conversation, I told everyone that where I live in Northern Virginia, just a couple of weeks ago, a tornado showed up and damaged, did not destroy, but damaged the gas station not for more than a mile away from my house. Now, I've lived in this area for 46 years, and I can tell you that tornadoes are not the norm. My wife grew up in Wichita, Kansas, where tornadoes are the norm. That's why she moved happily to Washington, D.C., where tornadoes have followed her for some reason. So if we don't succeed in taming this sufficiently, we are going to experience a bunch of really serious problems, including food insecurity. So let's imagine that even though we don't succeed in fully managing the process, that we have understood that we must take some action. So for example, we might say, you know what, when the houses fell into the ocean because the coast eroded, we're going to rezone this for a no building area. Sorry, you can't rebuild in that space because it's too hazardous. It's too likely to be damaged again. And you can imagine other kinds of things to respond to problems. For example, when we finally use up the oil or stop using oil, then we might repurpose the oil tankers to become water tankers, because there will be places that do not have enough water, desalination notwithstanding. And so the oil tankers of today may be replaced with the water tankers of the future. But we're still going to be struggling in this second door with greenhouse gas emission because we rejected nuclear, or we couldn't build it fast enough, or the renewables didn't produce enough power, and we found ourselves still relying on power produced by greenhouse gas producing mechanisms. So the question is, if we are not, could we go back to 2? Yeah, thank you. The question will be in this door number 2 scenario, what might we still attempt to do that would blunt the worst of the possible hazards awaiting us? And how would we go about persuading people to follow those actions? Now, the third door is the one that I'm most worried about, because I fear it may be the one we will fall through by default. And that's where we simply do not succeed in taking actions at all, or sufficient actions to cope with this. And we can see already here in 2022 what's coming if we don't do anything. There will absolutely be areas of food insecurity where crop growing will fail because of the temperature and lack of water. Some areas will literally be uninhabitable because the temperatures will be too high. I just read a note from India saying that there were 7 days in a row that were over 40 degrees centigrade just in April. And so we can just imagine what the summertime will be for them. It could be even as high as 50 degrees C, which is, at some point, your body can no longer perspire. It cannot get rid of the heat. And that's not livable. You die as a result of heat frustration. There will be areas where we can't live anymore, and so there'll be major migrations away from those population centers. How will we cope with that? We may even see population decreases in dramatic ways. We've already seen this serious pandemic, which we're still struggling with. As all of you know, there's a spike now in the Omicron variants. But it could be much worse. I mean, these could be very deathly kinds of diseases coming as a result of global warming, especially in the northern and southern hemispheres and towards the poles. We already are seeing in the North Pole the emergence of diseases, bacterial and otherwise, that have not been around. We have not been exposed to them for 10,000 years. And they're back, thanks to the melting of the tundra. And so that's a truly scary proposition. I hope we don't end up being forced into door number 3, but if you happen to be in that group, what we want to do is to figure out how and how we are actually going to survive as a society and as a civilization. You all know that Elon Musk's solution to the problem is move to Mars. But that has its own challenges in the form of terraforming to begin with. So now the next slide, if we can make that happen. There we are.